The S&P 500. You've probably heard of it, maybe on the news, from your grandparents, or that one friend who suddenly became a finance expert. The S&P 500 is pretty much the stock market's main character. When you hear that the stock market is up or down today, it's probably basing that claim off the S&P 500's performance. People in finance love to hit you with big stupid business guy words to make it seem like a foreign language, but the S&P is actually pretty easy to grasp. Let's start back on March 4th, 1957, which is the day that the S&P 500 was officially born. Standard & Poor's, a financial services company, wanted a better way to measure how the overall US stock market was doing, so they made a new index that tracked 500 of the biggest publicly traded companies. This actually wasn't their first time making an index. Back in 1923, they launched a smaller one with just 90 stocks. At the time, that was enough. The market had fewer public companies, and 90 was still a solid snapshot of the economy. Nowadays, the S&P 500 tracks 500 of the biggest publicly traded companies in the US. It's not all the companies, but just the biggest ones. It spans across 11 different sectors, from tech to healthcare to energy. So if the S&P 500 is doing well, the US economy is probably doing okay. Where it gets interesting is how the S&P 500 is weighed. Bigger companies have more influence on the index due to them being valued at way more than other companies. So Apple and Microsoft, they're either carrying the economy to victory or ruining everyone's day. Meanwhile, smaller companies are just kinda happy to be there and not moving the index much. The companies in the S&P 500 don't stay locked in forever. Companies are added or removed based on criteria like the value of the company, how profitable they are, and how much the stock is traded. If a company gets too small or stops meeting the requirements, it's replaced with something else. This keeps the index fresh, and it's a great design to ensure it keeps growing. When a company is added to the S&P, it's a big deal. Index funds tracking the S&P 500 are basically required to buy it, which gives it a big jump in their value. So why should you care? Well, the S&P 500 is considered to be a benchmark for the stock market in the US economy. It's used to track whether things are going well, or maybe you should look into that 401k again. Plus, around $15 trillion in assets are tied to the S&P 500, so when it moves, a lot of money moves with it. Another great thing about the S&P 500 is you don't need to go buy all 500 companies individually. That'd be kind of ridiculous. Instead, you can invest through funds on the market that are a near perfect reflection of it. These funds track the performance of the S&P 500, so when the index goes up, so does your investment. This is a part of why it's a favorite for long-term investing. Simple, diversified, and historically solid. Now let's clear up a couple of misconceptions. The S&P 500 is the whole stock market. Not quite. It's just the 500 largest US companies. There are thousands of others that aren't included. All companies in the S&P 500 are equally important. Nope. A few giants like Apple and Microsoft carry way more weight. The rest are kinda just along for the ride. So yeah, that's the S&P 500. It's not the whole market, but it is the part that everyone pretends to understand. Investing in it won't make you rich overnight, but it'll help you afford a roof and maybe guac at Chipotle someday.